Hi,
Hello, friends.
everyone.
Welcome to another book review by the Annotation Station. Hello. Welcome. If you're new here, my name's Steph. This is Natalie.
Hi.
Hi. And we are talking about our June pick, which was So Many Stars, an oral history of trans, non-binary, genderqueer, and two-spirit people of color by Caro De Robertis. Dun, 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 dun. So for anyone who is interested in joining the book club, we host live streams every month where we talk about two books on separate streams, not on the same stream. And the point of the book club is to read diversely and stay informed. So we read a nonfiction and a fiction every month. That's the goal. And if you'd like to join the Discord, become a channel member at any level to get access to Discord and talk about it with us more.
Yes.
Yeah. Okay. So we are doing our June book review for our nonfiction pick. And for the month of July, we are going to be reviewing Disfigured on fairy tales, disability, and making space.
Very excited to get into that one, especially since it seems like so far you're invested.
I am invested because the author has cerebral palsy, and I like the way that they're talking about it, and also as a white woman talking about what she feels comfortable talking about and what she feels comfortable not talking about, and then bringing in voices of her friends who have more intersectional views. So I'm like, I like the way that the author has structured it so far. But more of that
in the future.
In the future, yes. Okay. And then also, if you'd like to, right after this stream, we are going to be reviewing our fiction pick for June, which was Compound Fractures.
Yes.
By Andrew Joseph White. So stick around after the stream is over if you'd like to talk about that with us. Yay! Is there anything?
It'll be over on my channel.
Yes.
At 11 a.m.
Yes. We're at past already.
Nighttime, CST.
Woo! Okay. Is there anything I missed?
I don't think so.
Whoa! Look at me go. Already off to a good start. We have friends. Hi, Damien.
Hi, Damien.
Yay! We win! I feel like I've succeeded at life. Thank you.
Yes.
Hi, Roro. How are you? Andrew Joseph White. Yes.
Andrew Joseph White in this house. Excited to talk about his book.
Yes. Very excited for that. Okay. So, let's get started with talking about general thoughts, general ratings as we usually do. Mm-hmm. So personally, for me, I'm going to give this a no rating.
Yeah.
And my rationalization for that is because I feel like this book, of what its message and what it tries to do and how important it is that we have these voices, I feel like I would be doing the book a disservice by rating it, because a rating is not important here. It's just important that it be read, period.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, I definitely get that.
Yeah.
I mean, it falls into the type of book that, like, usually anyway, nonfiction, a lot of nonfiction, I don't rate anyway, because most of the time that's like the lens I see it through. Like, it's not about how amazing, quote unquote, was it for me, because it might not even be for me, you know? Right. It still might be doing what it needs to do for its target audience. So personally, I gave up on this one 60% through. I tried. Okay, y'all. I tried to get through the whole thing, but it just wasn't working for me personally. But either way, I probably wouldn't have rated it, even if I had read through the whole thing.
That's valid. Yeah, I feel like me and you not being trans is definitely, like, we're not the target audience for this.
Yeah.
And I can recognize that. But I still feel like I recognize how we don't have enough of this. Like, this is just like, so it just ends on like this whole positive note.
Mm-hmm.
which is a beautiful thing, you know? And again, like, I'm not the target audience for this because I am not trans. I am not non-binary. I am not a two-spirit person, you know? So, like, I get that this is important for the people who need to hear this voice.
Yeah.
But really, I feel like all you missed with the end of where you kind of jumped off is just there was this big section at the end where it was asking all of the people who were interviewed, what are some things you would like to say to the next generation of these identifying peoples?
Yeah.
You know? And it was mostly just like things that I think we as queer people in even our own identity say on the regular, you know, which is just be true to yourself, live, you know, the best you can, do positive things in the world, don't let anyone dull your shine, like those kinds of things, more or less. So that's really, I think, all you kind of missed towards the end.
Okay.
Yeah.
Got it. I have to say, okay, I do have one note since I listened to the audiobook, and this is in a sense being nitpicky, but I feel like it's still relevant to the experience of this. Like, since this is meant to be an oral history, it's literally in the title.
Mm-hmm.
I felt like it was a disservice to the type of storytelling for it to just be one narrator, because Caro De Robertis narrates the audiobook themselves, but they're like the only person narrating it. And I felt like there was not enough distinction between the different voices here, which I thought was important and would have made it more cohesive for me as someone listening to it, which also, like, it makes sense to listen to it as an oral history.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's kind of the point of oral history, is to hear it versus read it. So I felt like there was an incongruence there between the intent in which it was written and the way it was presented in audiobook format. I found myself often being like, I would have thoroughly enjoyed this if it was like a documentary I was watching.
Mm-hmm.
It was just interspersed like the same way, like in the exact same way that it was cut in this book and arranged together. If it was that way but a documentary and I could see each person that was being interviewed, I would have enjoyed that far more than the experience as it is now in an audiobook organized in the way that it is.
Yeah. 110%. You know, I think that is a completely valid criticism. And so, for context, the entire book is not really the author's voice.
Mm-hmm.
It's 20 people that the author interviewed, and it's literally like it says the person's name who was interviewed and then what they said. So in essence, if it, like you said, if it was a documentary, it would just be, here's a scene of this person saying the thing, here's a scene of this person saying the thing. And I was lucky enough to get to meet the author on a book tour for this. And I asked them that question. My question was, how did you kind of reconcile the process of taking something that is an oral history, translating it to text, and then also the choice of you being the narrator for all 20 voices? Like, what was that process and thought process for you? And Caro's answer was basically that they tried to, like, when they would talk as the person who's speaking in those sections, they would try to include some sort of inflection or like the feeling that they got or how they interpreted the person saying those things to them. Right. And in my head, I'm like, well, if it's a word for word literal translation of the conversation that they had together, why not just put in the recordings of the people saying the thing that you're translating into text?
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? So I mean, again, that's just a choice that I would have made differently. Because
I mean, I'm sure part of it is because then you need a certain level of quality of recording devices while you're conducting these interviews, if you're actually going to put it all together in that way. Because obviously, for example, a documentary is made and has a completely different production value when it's being made than just you interviewing someone and then later on putting it all together. So I feel like the audiobook route, from the very beginning, basically, they would have had to decide, no, I'm bringing in this good equipment that then later on would still make a quality audiobook if I assembled it together basically in the exact same way I assembled it in the written text.
Yeah.
So I get the complications of that, but that's where personally I would have brought in at least one more audiobook narrator. So it's like, it's fine if Caro is one of the narrators, but having only one narrator I thought was part of the problem. And ultimately, Caro De Robertis is not a professional narrator. So that's also another element. Like, I would have been fine if they had hired, even to keep it within the context of the book, a trans audiobook narrator who has experience in inflections, different voices, whatever, to better represent these different people, because they just read as very similar.
Yeah,
Only Caro as
I
the
get that.
narrator.
I get that. And I also feel like, because again, I did, even though I have the physical copy, I did listen to it as audio, thinking as an oral history, that would be the ideal way to read this. And now in retrospect, I feel like reading it with my eyeballs would have probably been better for me.
Yeah.
Because then I can insert the different voices to differentiate between the interviews. You know what I mean? Exactly. But again, this is like I feel like our criticism right now of the formatting and like the format choices that were made in the presentation of the book does not diminish the importance of the interviews, the content of the book, the content of what was said. Like, if anything that we're saying right now is turning anybody off, please ignore everything we just said and go read it anyway. Okay.
Yeah, like, because ultimately this is like how to elevate the experience further. Because ultimately, regardless, probably if either of us had just actually picked up the book physically and read it physically, we'd have a completely different perspective on it, on that element at least. So it's just that, like, one thing is not necessarily the same as the other.
Exactly. So, okay. So I think that clarifies our ratings and why you DNF'd because of the oral translation part. But anyway, so now that that's out of the way, let's talk about stories and information that was in the book. My dingus self did not save my notes correctly, so I'm going off of things that I learned throughout this and points that I feel like are really important. If anyone in the chat wants us to talk about something specific, please feel free to chime in or share your opinions. And Natalie, you can soundboard off me at any time.
Yeah.
So there were a couple points in here that I really liked. And I think the chapter that hit me the most in my feelings was found family and like chosen family. 100% all the time, I'm a sucker for chosen family. So yes. I think especially within queer communities, chosen family is extremely important.
Yeah, I agree. It's something that for many queer folks still is like inevitable, like, because so often still queer folk experience rejection, abandonment from their blood related family, that there is no other option but to try to find community. Because like, it is still an issue with like queer elders and stuff, that like not everyone for different reasons is able to find a community for themselves. But oftentimes when they can, it's necessary for survival. Like, it's needed because as humans we crave connection, we need connection, and we need the support of others to lead healthy lives where we're thriving and feel like both our physical needs and our emotional needs are being met by those we surround ourselves with. So I think that's something that for better or worse, is always going to be a very significant component of the queer experience,
Mhm.
because of the society that we live in, where not everyone is guaranteed acceptance from their families. And in this book, we get both sides of that too. Like, there's not only people here sharing their stories where they were rejected by their families, but there are also experiences where they do uh have acceptance and like understanding from
Mhm.
their blood related family. But it's sometimes so like you can have both, yes and kind of
Yeah.
situation. But
Yeah. The yes and in the sense of directing towards hope. Um,
mhm,
this was a very hopeful book. Like there was this one person, I'm really bad at names. On the regular, I'm bad at names. So like no one expect me to remember many names this stream, okay? But there was one person who their biological mother who they came out to was so supportive, and that they didn't realize like how supportive they were until them and all of their friends also came out, and then they were just like mom to everybody, and it's like, oh, okay, so now I'm everybody's mom.
yeah.
And I think they got like, I don't know if they got like a little jealous. I'm like, wait, that's my mom, but it's like but like
Yeah.
that was like a really sweet thing, and then there's also just like talking about trans moms and trans dads, and being like the trans person in the community who takes up that parental role and is like the guiding person that helps create a space of safety. So there were like that dynamic was really nice to see.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, because I feel like I remember part of what they talked about was like stepping into this kind of like parental role unexpectedly. Like
Mhm.
they had always thought, like, well, with the life I'm leading, I'm not gonna build a traditional family of my own. But then finding younger folk who need support, who crave the support, and just naturally finding themselves in circumstances where they have their kids that they take care of and whatever and nurture, um that's just something that I'm like, yeah, it kind of just happens to you. Oftentimes the older you get and you're openly queer and whatnot, you just find the queer babies, they find you
Yeah.
and they're like, yes, nurture me please.
Yes.
Even if you never really saw yourself in that role before.
Yeah. 100%. And I think there was what was interesting about it too was like, because most of this book focuses around like queer elders, and I think that in itself as a concept is really, I feel like interesting is not the right word, but it has this history that needs to be recognized, of that queer peoples or anyone who is of any kind of intersection has varying struggles that will lead to um this, we've talked about rejection, or just like this unacceptance by society that unfortunately leads to intersectional peoples having lower life expectancies,
Mm-hmm.
because of bullying or just all the varying things that come into play when you're a marginalized person. And so this idea that we are currently in a time in history where the people who are the queer elders right now lived through the invention of the LGBTQ community as a terminology. And
Mm-hmm.
that's wild to think about. Like that's how young the community is that we know now, that people who are the older people are like, yeah, I remember when we didn't have that word, or we
Yeah.
didn't have a flag, or we didn't have whatever.
Yeah. um what was I gonna say related to that? There was something, but my brain is blanking on
That's
me
okay.
right now.
That's okay.
Mhm.
We can come back
But I think I got it now. I think part of the point that Caro De Robertis was trying to do here was show that there are trans elders of all these different iterations of the trans experience. Like that was an important part of what they were trying to do, because so frequently it's a lot of like younger voices that are the ones most present in media, the most mainstream, as it were. And so there's this notion that trans people have not existed across very long periods of time, which is just simply not true. It's not true. And a lot of the times, trans identities through colonization have been erased, suppressed, and all these factors that lead to now a lot of communities that previously, through history, would have been far more accepting and understanding of these other experiences are now more closed off to those notions, because the standards of white culture have permeated in ways that are actually harmful to the existing culture.
Yeah. Most indigenous cultures had some form of, I guess, what is traditionally known in Native American culture as two-spirit. Most indigenous cultures had some permeation of that, and it wasn't until the colonization of indigenous peoples that it became this binary.
Yeah.
Hey Eric, are we doing sprints after this? So we are doing sprints today. They're gonna start at 1 p.m. EST. So because right after this, we're doing a book review for Compound Fracture.
Yes.
And then we're gonna be sprinting. So yeah, we are sprinting today, just not right now, starting in like an hour and a half.
Yes.
Yeah. Hope you can join us. We're gonna yeah. So where is he going with this? Yeah, so I loved that the author really focused on recording elder voices. Yeah. So that was cool. Okay. And then, well, so another thing I wanted to talk about was there was this law that I learned about in this. And it was like something I had never thought about before.
Yeah.
And it blew my mind that it was something that, one, we had to argue about in court, because why do y'all care so much?
Yeah.
You know? And then also how recent this law is.
Yeah.
Because also, like, I'm gonna say it before and I'm gonna say it again, people who fight to create these anti-gay, anti-trans, whatever bills, I'm like, it's very gay of you to care about what's going on in people's pants.
Like, why do you care so badly?
Right.
Why do you care? I'm like, literally, as long as it's not quite literally hurting anybody,
literally,
why does it matter to you?
Right. I'm like,
I'm like, as a queer person, I don't even think that hard about this shit.
You know, hypersexualization of queerness is like, I'm like, no, you're giving gay. Like, okay, but whatever. Eric says, I'll be hanging around. It's pouring rain here, so I'll just be reading and hanging out. Oh, yay! Hang out with us.
Amazing. I don't know. I don't think you actually explained what the law is.
So I had to open up another tab because I didn't want to like misquote any information. Again, I'm bad at names and dates and things. My ADHD is ADHD. So it is around death certificates.
Yes.
And so there was a person, and this bill came to pass, I want to say, hold on, I'm going to get you a number. Was it 2012? I think it was 2012. Oh, no. Okay. They passed away in 2012, but the law came about 2 years later, I think. So by 2014 to 2015. And what happened was this person was trans mask. And so they built a community in which, when it was time for the community to grieve, they were going to make sure that they were respected during the grieving process as how they they chose to be presented, but also that they had their partner be the one to like take care of all the legal documents that go along with that process. And so when their partner went to get the death certificate, they had legally changed their gender on their driver's license, their passport, whatever else. And the coroner decided to change that to female, going by what they saw on the body when they were preparing everything for the funeral. And it's like, okay, but the partner presented all this legal documentation that they transitioned, and this is what we want to be respected. And the coroner to override the legal documents to say, I go by what I see with my eyeballs because this person did not choose to physically transition is so disrespectful.
Yes, exactly. Like that he was leading his life as a man. Like that was his life. And the level of disrespect once his death came about is like ridiculous. It's like, why do you even have to go to court to argue about this, to say this person deserves the dignity of having their last legal existing document represent who they were in life?
Yes.
There is no need for this document to say female when his life was led as a man, you know? And just thinking about how recent that was, you know, it's just sad.
Yeah.
It's sad.
It's sad. It's messed up. And then also, like, depending on what cultural practices you have, the tombstone will sometimes indicate whether that person was male or female. And so with the coroner making that decision, they tried to put on his tombstone female. And it's like, no, we're not going to sit here and allow the public to think that that's the identity of the person who's resting here, because that's not how they wanted to be remembered.
Exactly.
So I was ready to throw hands. I was heated. I'm trying to remember the name of the law. I think it's called Lee's Law, because that was their name, Lee. I think that was their last name, if I'm not mistaken. But
I can't remember, honestly.
Yeah. But yeah, so I was like, okay. But the fact that only within the past 10 years has that become a thing. Again, I think it feeds into this false notion of like seeing all these newer regulations and thinking, oh, trans people are only a more recent activity. It's like, no, because BS, like what that coroner was doing, has been an issue for forever. And it finally, unfortunately, at the cost of this partner's grief and money and time and spirit to take this up with legal action, is why we've gotten this change. But like with a lot of these things that happen, most people don't have the resources, you know, or even the willpower, because that's hard to fight that battle that leads to progress for everyone else. Like someone to take up that mantle is a lot to ask. And so we can't blame anybody for, you know, for it not wanting to do that or failing to do it, even if they maybe tried before that. Because it's crazy, y'all. It's crazy in the streets. So that was an important thing that I learned, and I was like, ready to fight.
You're like, I'm ready to tussle.
Yes. Oh, another really beautiful thing. Okay. Again, I'm really bad at names, so I'm not even going to say that I remember the name. I just remember that there was this trans mother, right? Because, so the point was that they're a trans mother in their community, and they were interviewed in the book. And I think Caro said, like, shortly after the book was published, which was this year, that person passed away. But that they passed away in the arms of their chosen family. I cried. Actually, they had the whole bookshop crying. Okay, like literally, I kid you not. So I read it, and then when they talked about it at the book tour, everybody stopped. The bookshop owner got tissues and passed around tissues, and we all sat there and cried. It was the most beautiful thing ever. And I was sitting in the front row as I do, so I'm just looking at Caro, and Caro's looking at me, and we're just like,
dead in the eyes.
dead in the eyes, sobbing like.
Oh my gosh.
It was great. It was beautiful. Yeah. So okay. Let's see what else. I'm trying to think of what else I wanted to talk about. Oh, I learned about Tita Aida.
Remind me.
Tita Aida is a trans advocate, Filipino and Chinese, I think. They focus on trans visibility.
Okay.
And they started like a whole bunch of there's like a trans march. They helped create awareness for like World AIDS Day. They're like a really big trans activist, apparently.
Mm-hmm.
And they're still very much active. I think mostly in Asia.
Okay.
They're active. But that the reason that their persona, because they didn't start off as Tita Aida, I think, if I remember correctly, that their community wanted to create, I guess, almost like a caricature or like a spokesperson for the community as like a representative who would promote the marches and promote all of these things. And so they came up with Tita Aida, and like this person, Tita Aida, like stepped up, and now they are like a representative for the community at all these activist activities, which is great. And I was like, oh, that's so sweet.
Yeah.
Oh, because wait, I'm looking at a thing here. Tita means big sister in Hawaiian and aunt in Tagalog in Philippine. Yeah. So that makes sense. So yeah, that's something else that I wanted to bring up. And I was like, oh, I never really thought about like an intentional spokesperson to represent the community in that way. So that was that. And what else?
Maybe you can talk about, because I don't think I got to that part. And when I look at the book for the different sections, there is a part that's like the art and power of drag, which I don't think I got there. I'm pretty sure I left off in like the section of the AIDS crisis, which was very interesting to me because that's a part of queer history that's like so unfortunate and weird, like it, but it's also so important for me to like read about it and remember what those times were like, what people during this time had to go through, and the solidarity that often developed between sapphic women and gay men, because oftentimes they'd be the only ones willing to take the risk, quote unquote, because they didn't actually know how this disease spread.
Exactly.
The amount of misconceptions that were spread at the time. I'm pretty sure they even shared a story of someone who his partner actually abandoned him once he got diagnosed. Like they lived together, they had this whole relationship, but then once he actually got sick, he had no one to actually be there for him, as his life was inevitably, leading to the end, because they didn't yet have the medicine to actually make sure that more of these people could survive, that's just, man.
Yeah. It's sad. It's really sad. There was a person in this section who I think was a pastor, who was, I believe, a trans, or maybe they were gay. Could be wrong. But they talked about preaching to the community about like practicing safety, and they themselves contracted HIV, and then they felt this kind of guilt that they were like, because we didn't understand how it transmitted, they were like, I got the thing that I'm preaching to my community to be safe against getting, and does that make me a hypocrite? And am I now, because I fell victim to the thing that society is claiming is like a queer disease, does that then mean that they shouldn't be allowed to be a leader within their community because they felt like they failed everyone in that way? And that was really heartbreaking.
Yeah.
So they talked about PTSD from that, people who survived that era in history through like the AIDS epidemic, and like the stigma against queer people as being like the cause, which we obviously know is not true.
Yeah.
But there's a PTSD that is still prevalent in people who survived that, as being like, and I think that I can see a connection there to anyone who is from a demographic who has survived a time in history in which their community was blamed for something that was not their fault. This PTSD in the next time something bad happens, who's going to be blamed for it?
Yeah.
You know?
Exactly.
So it's really scary. And I think they also talked about, I don't know if it was the person themselves that was being interviewed that was in the military, or the person's family that was in the military, but they were talking about like that if they got diagnosed with HIV and AIDS and they were in the military, there was this like double stigma that would lead to them being kicked out or ostracized, because it's like in the military, they are being put into this situation where it's like, we stand together, we are family, we are one unit. But the moment someone is going through something that is a stigmatized experience, all of a sudden it's like being ripped away from someone who said, I am your family with parameters. You know what I mean? So there was like a double loss there of, oh, not only are you not my family anymore, but also we don't support queer people, so get out.
Yeah.
So, and there's this like automatic assumption that anyone who had HIV and AIDS was automatically gay. So that was just really sad. What else? Trying to remember. I feel like those are the main things that I remember from that section.
Okay.
Because a lot of it was just like their experiences in living with that time.
Yeah.
How sad it was, how like different groups like Latinos versus Indigenous Americans experienced it versus how a white man would experience it, but they were all queer in some aspect, and so there were still some like overlapping experiences there. Yeah, and just the saddest thing, like you said already, was just a lot of them being alone or being separated from their
loved ones.
Their loved ones. Yeah, that was the main thing. What else did I want to talk about? I feel like
I feel like the section, surely, I don't know, about art and expression was your vibe. I didn't get there. I'm like, surely they must have talked about something there that interested you. But
yeah, I mean, like again, a lot of it is stuff that none of it was new to me. Being an
Mhm.
artist and being an artist in the greater New York City area, which is like
Yeah.
one of the artistic queer epicenters of the world, right? Like
Yeah.
none of this was new to me. But it was just like I found that section to contain a lot of beautiful stories of people talking about when did they realize that their body is different from what society was telling them they had to present as, right? Like
Mhm.
who would find themselves dressing up in their mom's clothes and being like, oh, this isn't something that everybody did and not everybody felt good doing that, you know? And then really just kind of like the transition within the past 20 years
Mhm.
of feeling more safe as physical spaces have opened up in various parts of the world, that it's okay to, like, what's the word? Externally express yourself.
Yeah.
Right. A lot of them talked about being in New York. So yeah, that section, surprisingly, I don't have a lot of stuff to say about that.
Okay.
Because it was very much
I
straightforward.
was just curious, you
Yeah.
know.
Yeah, that part I didn't have a lot to say because it's very much like straightforward of just like it was sweet, it was important, it was beautiful, like that, like slay, honestly. That's fine. One part though that is important, and I don't remember which section it's in, but there were a couple people who were Latine, and I think one of them was talking about being in Colombia. And if it's not Colombia, I don't remember where exactly it was. But they were talking about running away from their home country because they were experiencing, but there were kidnappings happening by the cartel of people who were trans or gay or whatever. And it was like one person talked about, I think they were at a party or something, and the cartel kind of just raided, and then it's very triggering, so definitely look into the trigger warnings before anyone goes into this book if you're still here, because they talked about horrible things that were done to them and horrible things that were done to the people around them and how they would have to hide their identity
Yeah.
in order to just survive, and
Mhm.
then immigrating to the United States and still having to hide their identity because in the 90s and the 80s, that this place, as the quote unquote land of the free, which is why they chose to come here, they did not actually experience the freedom that they were looking for. And that was just like, it was heartbreaking to hear about, but also happy to know that they're still around and that they're finally in the year 2025 able to express themselves. It's like, okay, but it only took 50 years, you know?
Yeah, you know. Just just a little bit of time.
A little bit. Just took half their life, but we got there. Um, so yeah, that part, hearing those stories of people who emigrated here looking for that freedom and still struggling to find it.
Yeah.
So that. Yeah, I don't know what else.
Yeah, I think that's pretty much, especially as someone who didn't finish, I think that's all I can say, you know,
Yeah.
on the book.
Yeah. Yeah, I feel like that's, I mean, if someone who is not familiar with multicultural aspects of trans identity is looking for a place to learn about those things, they will definitely learn a lot from this as far
Yeah.
as terminology and cultural differences, and how to interact in a way that is respectful with people
Yeah.
from those communities. But for me and you who are in it, we're like, yeah, that, oh,
Yeah. Yeah. Pretty much.
yeah, like the so yeah, I think all I have to really say is that it is a beautiful book, and I'm sad to say that we still need more of this.
Yeah.
That's really it.
Pretty
Okay.
much.
So I don't know if I have anything else to say about it.
I think that might be it for us.
Yeah. Okay. Cool. So If anyone is going to join us for Disfigured, which is our July pick, please consider joining the Discord by becoming a channel member at any level, or you can make sure you subscribe to our channel so you get a notification when the live show is going to be to talk about fairy tales and disability, which is really interesting. Talks a lot about Disney.
Yes, I was aware of that.
Yeah,
And
that's
it came up in our conversations of
Yeah.
something to potentially read. So,
Yeah. So, okay, cool. Anyway, I guess that's it for today.
yeah.
For this. All right, we'll be back in 15 minutes on Natalie's channel to discuss compound factors.
Yes.
Yay! Okay, bye everybody.
Bye.
See you later, or see you in a little bit.